Hey guys, tonight we re-diving into a different kind of survival. The survival of quiet contemplation against the hurried pace of the modern world. We are going to leave behind the sharp edges of today and settle into the soft glow of a forgotten history. Close your eyes, feel the weight of your day lift away, and join me inside this ancient library as the first candlelight of autumn stretches its gentle shadows across the warm wooden floors. The air smells of dust, old paper, and a hint of rain, promising a journey inward. You might want to sit back, because we're about to wander into a world where slow was not a luxury, it was the only speed people knew. Honestly, you'd never survive there without patience. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Love seeing this sleepy little campfire of ours glowing across time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are sitting in a quiet library that smells faintly of parchment and tea. Outside, the last amber rays of sunlight are dissolving into a fog that rolls over a medieval town. Roofs of uneven tiles glimmer weightly from the afternoon drizzle, and chimneys exhale thin ribbons of smoke that rise and vanish like whispered secrets. The cobblestone streets are empty now, save for the occasional stray cat padding silently toward some secret appointment. There's something comforting about how small everything feels when the day exhales its final breath. The scholar in you, perhaps just a quiet corner of your imagination, sits at an old oak desk. The surface is uneven, worn smooth by centuries of elbows and ink stains. You reach out and feel the coolness of the wood beneath your fingers. It feels patient. The faint sound of rain tapping against the window pane joins the rhythmic creak of the old building. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls 6 times. The sound lingers, suspended in the mist, then fades. You pour yourself a cup of Earl Grey from a brass kettle that sighs like an old friend. The steam curls upward, catching the candlelight in threads of gold. The first sip warms you instantly, spreading through your chest like the soft hum of an old violin string. You think to yourself that perhaps tea was humankind's earliest form of therapy. The monks might have called it contemplation, but let's be honest, it's just ancient self-care. Across the table lies a thick leather-bound chronicle, its spine cracked and fragile. You open it slowly, the way you might approach a sleeping animal. The pages sigh, as though grateful to be touched again after centuries of silence. Faded ink dances across the parchment in elegant, spidery lines. Every letter seems to carry the echo of a quill scratching under candlelight long ago. You imagine a monk bent over a desk, the world outside frozen in winter, his only companion the soft scratch of ink and the whisper of turning pages. This was the age of monasteries, the quiet heartbeats of medieval Europe. Long before universities or printing presses, stone sanctuaries safeguarded the world's knowledge. While kingdoms rose and fell, monks brewed ink, bound parchment, and copied words destined to outlive them by centuries. Their manuscripts held not only prayers, but weather notes, planting guides, and sketches of beasts never seen. They were the first data keepers, no electricity, just devotion and robes. As you lean closer, candlelight reveals faint marginalia loops, spirals, and tiny faces carved by unknown hands. Were they jokes, codes, or idle sketches? Outside, fog presses close. A flame bends in a quiet breath. Shadows glide over ancient shelves, each book a fragile universe, softly humming with all that time chose to remember. You imagine the monks walking these very halls centuries ago, their sandals whispering over the cold stone floors. Their lives were measured not in hours, but in prayers and seasons. They rose with the dawn bell, worked by candlelight, and ended each day in silence. To survive the Middle Ages wasn't it just about food and shelter, it was about finding peace in repetition. meaning in simplicity and humor in monotony. You could say they were the original masters of mindfulness, minus the yoga mats. Your tea has cooled slightly, and you swirl the last bit in the cup. The sound echoes softly, almost like the ticking of an unseen clock. You glance again at the strange markings in the margin. Some historians believe these hidden symbols could have been codes mnemonics to remember texts, or perhaps secret messages passed between scribes. Others think they were simply the marks of tired eyes, letting the mind wander after long hours of copying, but no one truly knows. The mystery lingers, unsolved and unbothered by modern curiosity. You stretch slightly, hearing the faint creak of your chair. The rain outside softens into mist. Through the window, street lamps flicker, wrapped in fog. You picture walking outside, the air, earthy and cool, cobblestones cold beneath your feet. Somewhere, a baker tends his fire. Elsewhere, a child drifts to sleep by a fading hearth. Survival, you think, has never been about strength, but quiet endurance, the faith that life continues, even in stillness. Your fingers trace the book's edge. Candlelight pools and sways, breathing softly like memory itself. The scent of wax and paper fills the air. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, time loosens its grip. It doesn't move forward, it simply stays. Maybe you think this is what true survival has always been about, not fighting the world, but learning to move gently within it. The monks understood it. The farmers understood it. And maybe, sitting here with your tea and a whispering candle, you do too. The last drop of wax slips down the candle's side, its glow turning the page to gold. Beyond the fog, a bell tolls, low, slow, like a distant lullaby. Your eyes grow heavy. The library breathes softly around you. In that tender hush, between rain's sigh and parchment's whisper, you drift, not leaving history, but sinking into it where time melts like candlelight. The storm that had passed during the night has left the air smelling faintly of wet stone and quiet beginnings. By morning, the light returns not harsh or hurried, but the kind that seeps in politely through stained glass windows, as if asking permission to exist. You sit where you were the night before, the oak desk still cooled beneath your palms. The first thing you notice is the dust-tiny, weightless travelers, drifting lazily through the sunbeams that slide across the room. They rise and fall in slow, hypnotic spirals, like 1,000 quiet worlds suspended between breaths. The library, at this hour, feels like a creature half awake. Every creak of wood, every distant flutter of paper sounds deliberate, as though the building itself stretches after a long sleep. You watch the dust motes move in and out of the light, each one catching a color from the stained glass amber, sapphire, rose, and emerald spinning in a soft, silent waltz. If patience could dance, it would look like this. You could almost believe the universe is rehearsing for a performance meant only for your eyes. Your fingertips glide over the old oak table, rough in places, smooth in others. You imagine the scholars and dreamers who once sat here, their thoughts pressed faintly into the grain. Ink stains, sleepless nights, quiet resolve all still linger. Beneath your touch, the wood hums softly with the calm of age, the peace of something that has already outlasted worry. You lift a page of the chronicle, and it whispers against your fingertips. The sound is almost like the hush of a soft tide. The parchment bends, but does not break. Its edges are feathery, fragile, but stubborn. The letters, written in careful, flowing ink, remain vivid despite centuries of silence. You tilt the page slightly, and the sunlight picks up the faint sheen of the ink brownish black, uneven, alive. It's strange to think that something as ephemeral as soot and tree sap could outlast empires. In the medieval world, ink wasn't a simple thing to come by. It was an alchemy of patience and trial. Monks would collect soot from burned oil lamps, grind it fine, and mix it with the sticky resin of trees. Some even added egg whites to make the mixture adhere better to parchment. The result was a kind of dark, living paint that could bend with the page and endure centuries without flaking away. There is something beautifully ironic in the thought that the same smoke that once darkened their ceilings ended up preserving their words. Recycling, it seems, was not invented by modern virtue. It was born of necessity and a touch of divine improvisation. You take a deep breath. The air is thick with that peculiar perfume of old libraries, a mix of dust, ink, and time. Every breath feels like inhaling a fragment of history. You lean back and listen. Somewhere, a window frame clicks as it adjusts to the day's warmth. The faintest breeze moves through the corridor, and a few pages flutter in response, as if nodding politely to the wind. You half expect the books to start whispering to each other, complaining about how long it's been since anyone read them. The sunlight shifts again, crawling higher across the desk. A single ray lands on a closed book near your elbow. The cover, once dyed deep blue, has faded to the color of a summer sky just before dusk. You reach out and brush away a thin layer of dust. Beneath your hand, the leather is soft, almost like skin. For a moment, it feels as if the book is breathing. You open it slowly, and something curious catches your eye. On the inside cover, there's a faint imprint and outline of a quill feather, perfectly preserved. It's not drawn or painted. It's as if the feather had rested there for centuries, leaving its shadow behind. You turn another page and find a different mark, a small key shape, ghost-like, barely visible. These are not illustrations, but impressions, the slow chemical memories of contact. When parchment and leather lie together for centuries, they begin to share secrets. Oils, minerals, and light conspire to etch invisible echoes of what once touched them. Over time, these imprints emerge, as if the objects themselves refuse to be forgotten. You sit back, marveling. It's strange to think that even inanimate things remember. Every book here is more than words. It's a quiet witness to everything that has ever brushed against it. A candle flame, a quill, a forgotten feather, maybe even a teardrop or two. In this way, the archive is not merely a collection of knowledge, but a museum of accidents. You can't help but smile. Humans may forget, but paper has the patience to keep secrets. The light deepens toward afternoon. The colors on the floor shift from gold to honey, from honey to amber. You can hear the slow sigh of wood as it warms. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon coos softly, like a monk too lazy to finish morning prayers. You chuckle quietly. Even the birds here seem contemplative. You turn another page, and the faint scent of eggshell ink drifts up dry, dusty, faintly sweet. You picture the monk who mixed soot and sap with quiet devotion, never knowing his ink would outlast his name. Perhaps permanence is overrated. Maybe what endures is care itself. A breeze stirs the stained glass, and fractured light ripples across your face. Dust motes whirl, shimmer, then slow again, tiny galaxies born and fading in a single beam. You lean closer, mesmerized. Somewhere you once read that light never truly dies. It only travels on, softer, fainter. Perhaps these motes are proof small universes caught between breath and memory, drifting endlessly through time. The library is utterly still. Even your breath feels woven into its rhythm. You close your eyes, seeing again the stained glass colors and dust suspended in golden air. Time stretches, folding softly inward. The past feels near like a second skin. You whisper, "We don't preserve the past. It's the past that preserves us." The dust shimmers in quiet reply. You smile, realizing survival may simply mean drifting like dust in light, neither clinging nor falling, just existing between sun and silence. The room feels warmer. The air hums gently as the light flickers once more, yielding to the slow descent of evening. The air inside the library has grown warmer, softer, that gentle kind of warmth that lingers not from the sun, but from time itself. The candle you lit hours ago has burned low, its flame steady, its wax pooled like a small glowing lake. On the desk, your cup of tea sits forgotten, a thin veil of steam, barely visible above the rim. When you lift it for a sip, the liquid has turned lukewarm, the kind of quiet temperature that asks for no reaction. You smile at it anyway. Even cooled, it carries the faint memory of comfort. Outside, the light has faded to that tender shade between gold and dusk. The stained glass no longer spills colors across the shelves, only a muted amber that seems to hum rather than shine. The silence in the room thickens, not heavy, just full. You rest your palms on the table again, feeling the subtle grain beneath your skin, and your thoughts begin to wander beyond the library walls, to fields, to earth, to the lives of those who once fed the world without ever writing their names in any book. The medieval farmer was a quiet survivor. No grand speeches, no polished philosophies, just the slow rhythm of sunrise and soil. You can almost hear them now, faint echoes carried through the centuries, the soft clatter of wooden tools, the steady pull of an ox, the creak of a leather harness. Every sound measured, every movement deliberate. Their lives were written not in ink, but in furrows and footsteps, and yet their endurance shaped everything that followed. You open a new page in the chronicle before you. The illustration is simple, a hand-drawn field divided neatly into thirds, each labeled with tiny Latin inscriptions. Beneath it, a few lines describe the practice that changed Europe's survival story, the three-field crop rotation system. It was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of exhausting the land with one stubborn crop, farmers learned to divide their fields into three sections. One for grains, like wheat or rye, another for legumes, such as peas or beans, and one left fallow, resting, recovering, breathing. Each year, they rotated the crops, giving the soil time to renew itself. The result was miraculous in its quiet way, healthier land, fuller granaries, and fewer hungry winters. You run your finger along the drawing, tracing the lines that represent these ancient fields. The logic feels timeless. Nature, after all, has always known the rhythm of rest. Even the earth needs to sleep, to recover from its own generosity. You think about how little we let things rest now. Our soil, our screens, our minds. We rush, refill, refresh, repeat. But these farmers, centuries ago, had already discovered the wisdom of pausing. Your teacup now feels cool against your fingertips. You place it down softly, and the small clink echoes in the room like punctuation at the end of a long, slow sentence. The page before you shows another sketch, a woman washing linen by the river, her sleeves rolled up, her expression calm. You lean closer, amused and slightly bewildered by the caption, Urina Collecta. For a moment, you blink, thinking it must be a mistake. But no, it's exactly what it says. In medieval Europe, urine was a kind of household gold. People collected it in clay jars and used it for nearly everything. It was their secret ingredient for washing, bleaching cloth, and even tanning leather. Its natural ammonia content made it powerful and cheap. Entire towns had piss collectors who would gather it from households and sell it to dyers and fullers. You can't help but laugh quietly. Civilization, it seems, was built not only on faith and iron, but also on very creative chemistry. There's something strangely charming about that resourcefulness. Nothing was wasted. Everything had purpose. Even the most unglamorous substances were given a role. It's the kind of humble practicality we've lost somewhere between convenience and abundance. You imagine a medieval washerwoman humming to herself by the river, her bucket of improvised detergent beside her, content in her routine. Her world was small but complete. A soft breeze slips in through a crack in the window, rustling a few pages. The candle flame wavers, but does not falter. The air carries a faint scent of parchment, smoke, and the sweet ghost of your tea. You let the sounds blend together, the whisper of paper, the sigh of the wood, the nearly inaudible heartbeat of time. Everything here feels slower than the world outside, and in that slowness, you sense a kind of strength. You wonder what survival meant to them, not as a grand narrative, but as a daily rhythm. A loaf of bread baked at dawn, a field weeded before the rain, a cloak mended by firelight. There was no luxury of distraction, no illusion of infinite choice, just necessity shaped into ritual. And maybe that's why it feels so peaceful to imagine, because simplicity at its core is a kind of mercy. You close the book gently. Its pages exhale a faint puff of dust, like a sigh of satisfaction. The light in the room has shifted again, cooling now, a deep honey fading toward evening blue. You glance at your reflection in the glass of a nearby cabinet, a small, flickering silhouette framed by books and shadow. You look both ancient and new, like a thought caught between centuries. Your eyes drift back to the desk. The empty cup, the worn manuscript, the candle slowly surrendering to its last inch. These small things, so ordinary, so still, carry more presence than any noise the modern world can offer. You think of the monks, the farmers, the washerwomen, and realize that their kind of survival had nothing to do with conquest. It was about attunement, the grace of living alongside the world, not on top of it. You breathe slowly, the air cool against your skin. Outside, a distant bell tolls low, unhurried, melting into the hush of the library. You close your eyes, letting the sound settle. Survival, you think, isn't always struggle. Sometimes it's gentleness mending, resting, reusing what the world gives. You trace the book's cover, then stand as the chair creaks softly. Dust still dances in the last golden light, and for a fleeting moment, it feels as if history itself breathes with you slow, steady, content in the quiet rhythm of simple endurance. The rain begins softly, a hush against the high windows of the library, like fingers drumming gently on glass. You glance up from the page you've been reading, and for a moment, you let the sound fill the silence. The world outside is turning gray, the kind of gray that smells of wet leaves and patience. The candle flame trembles, its reflection swaying faintly on the polished surface of your teacup. You close your eyes. The sound of rain seems to pull you backward, away from books and ink, into something older, simpler, the memory of shelter itself. You imagine it now, a small hut, half buried in the green hush of an ancient countryside. The walls are made of wattle and daub, woven sticks packed with clay, straw, and earth, their surface mottled with moss and age. The roof droops slightly, but holds steady, thatched with reeds darkened by decades of rain. A thin trail of smoke curls from a hole at the top, escaping into the mist. Inside, it's dim and warm. The air smells of soil and wood smoke, faintly sweet with damp straw. You can almost hear the rain on the roof, soft, uneven, rhythmic, the same melody that must have sung over countless huts centuries ago. The earthen walls breathe faintly, exhaling the scent of the land itself. They hold warmth in winter and cool in summer, a simple, quiet alchemy of nature and patience. Some historians still debate whether the use of wattle and daub was more efficient than simple stone structures in northern climates, given the constant need for repair. But you can't help thinking that efficiency was never really the point. There is a tenderness in such impermanence, a kind of pact between people and the land they inhabit. These homes weren't meant to last forever. They were meant to belong, to blend back into the soil when their time was done. You picture a small fire in the center of the hut, its glow licking at the clay walls, painting them in soft amber. A pot hangs above the embers, steam curling upward like a ghost of supper. The floor, packed earth, feels cool and solid beneath bare feet. The ceiling hums quietly with the sound of the rain. Somewhere, a wooden door creaks in its frame. Everything smells alive: moss, mud, smoke, life in its most elemental form. Back in the library, a drop of rain hits the window louder than the rest. You open your eyes. The room around you feels the same, yet slightly transformed. The boundaries between imagination and memory blur. The candlelight glows like firelight now, and the dusty shelves resemble the rough lines of earthen walls. You realize how thin the line is between past and present when both are wrapped in the same sound of falling rain. You turn a page, and your gaze falls on a passage describing the medieval lord, the dominus, a master of land and law. The page tells of how, under the feudal system, the lord owned not only the soil, but the lives that worked it. His manor stood on the hill, watching over the cottages below. The peasants owed him service, in crops, in labor, sometimes in silence. Their world was small and bound by obligation, yet within those limits, they found ways to endure. You imagine a weary farmer leaving his wattle and daub hut at dawn, the mist still hugging the ground, glancing up at the Lord's stone manor glowing faintly in the distance. Two homes, two worlds, one of power and permanence, the other of earth and endurance. Yet between them, the same rain fell, the same soil grew the same wheat, and the same wind whispered through both roofs at night. Survival, it seems, had no preference for title or stone. Another rumble of thunder rolls faintly beyond the library walls. The rain thickens, drawing lines of water down the glass. You lean closer to the window, watching the droplets race one another, leaving thin, glistening trails. The world outside is blurry, a watercolor of grays and greens. For a moment, it feels like you're looking not out, but inward, into a landscape shaped by memory more than sight. Somewhere in those imagined northern hills, beneath a veil of fog, legends say there once stood a village that disappeared overnight. No war, no fire, no trace, only a thick mist that rolled in from the sea and never lifted. A local chronicle mentions it briefly, as if afraid to linger. The hamlet of Wintersham was seen no more after the night of the great fog. You think about that story as the rain taps its patient rhythm. Did the village really vanish? Or did it simply sink back into the earth, its huts melting into moss, its paths reclaimed by forest, its people remembered only as a whisper in the land? Maybe that's how nature keeps its balance, by taking back what we build too tightly. You breathe in deeply. The air in the library carries the faint dampness of the storm outside. For a moment, you could swear you smell moss, that living, green scent that clings to stones after rain. The candle flickers again, and the shadows on the wall look like branches swaying. In your mind, you're still in that little hut. The fire has burned low now, and the smoke drifts lazily into the rafters. You can hear the wind outside brushing through the reeds of the roof. The rain is slowing, falling softer, like the world exhaling after a long thought. You wrap a wool blanket around your shoulders and listen to the dripping eaves, to the heartbeat of the earth beneath the floor, to the silence between drops. You think how a humble place can feel more alive than any grand hall. There's warmth in its fragility, peace in its imperfection, the moss, the clay, the rain, all belonging together. Back in the library, the candle trembles once before steadying. The rain fades, leaving only occasional taps against the pane. Your hand traces the ink on the page, textured like the earth itself. Perhaps survival means staying soft enough to belong, shaped and weathered by the world, returning to its warmth. As the last drops fall, you feel it, the quiet pulse beneath everything, the same heartbeat that once lived in moss and mud, echoing centuries later. The rain has softened to a whisper now, a faint mist against the window, more memory than storm. The library feels smaller in its warmth, as if the walls have drawn closer to listen. You rise from your chair, stretching the stillness out of your body, and wander toward the small brass kettle resting on the hearth. Its surface glows faintly in the candlelight, dull gold with the patina of age. You lift it gently, and the handle hums with a familiar heat. The water inside has long cooled, so you refill it, each drop ringing softly as it strikes the metal. The sound is oddly comforting, an old rhythm, a promise of warmth. As you place the kettle back over the flame, the air begins to stir. Slowly, the soft hiss of heat meeting metal builds into a gentle murmur. Steam rises in delicate tendrils, curling and folding upon themselves like ghostly ribbons. There is something ritualistic about it, this quiet act of waiting for water to boil. It feels older than memory, as if each sound, each rising wisp of vapor, is part of a ceremony passed down through centuries. The flame crackles, and the light glints off the worn copper edges of the kettle. You breathe in the faint scent of metal and fire, and it blends with the lingering perfume of parchment and rain. When the first bubbling sound begins, you lean closer, watching the small bursts of steam bloom like white petals. You reach for the tin of tea leaves on the desk, dark, curled fragments of time waiting to awaken. You pour them into the waiting pot, and the moment the hot water touches them, a rich fragrance unfurls. It rolls through the room in slow waves, earthy, floral, faintly smoky. The scent wraps around you like a warm shawl, closing out the cold world beyond the glass. You pour the tea into a porcelain cup, its surface thin but strong, smooth as a whisper. The heat seeps instantly into your palms, a living pulse against the skin. You cradle it between your hands, feeling the weight, the temperature, the small, steady comfort of it. Outside, the rain pauses, listening. Inside, the silence is shaped by warmth. You take your first sip slowly. The taste is deep, not sharp, not sweet, but round and quiet, like a story that knows its own ending. The warmth slides down your throat, spreading outward, and for a moment, everything in the world seems to settle into place. A candle flickers beside you, the pages of the old books glow faintly, and the faint mist outside feels less like cold and more like distance. In that stillness, you find yourself thinking about inns, the old kind, the ones from long before cities and schedules. In medieval times, travelers would follow muddy roads by foot or horse until they reached a wooden sign swinging above a doorway. A lantern, a painted stag, a warm emblem of welcome. These inns were more than shelters. They were the crossroads of stories. A tired merchant might share a bench with a pilgrim, a farmer with a wandering minstrel. The air would be thick with the smell of broth and ale, the clatter of wooden mugs, the murmur of tired voices trading rumors of harvests and wars. News spread not through parchment or decree, but through conversation, through the warmth of shared firelight and the honesty that comes when strangers sit shoulder to shoulder. You imagine the innkeeper bustling between tables, stirring a pot of stew with one hand and listening with the other. Behind him, a craftsman might be mending a broken clasp using a strange, shimmering glue made from fish skins, fish glue, the miracle adhesive of its time. Derived from boiled fish bladders and skin, it dried clear, flexible, and nearly unbreakable. Artisans prized it for its strength and subtlety, using it to repair instruments, book bindings, and even delicate carvings. The smell, they said, was terrible, but the result was unmatched. It's a small detail, yet you find yourself charmed by it. The idea that even the sea had its quiet hand in the making of civilization. Fish and fire, earth and ink, all conspiring to hold things together. Perhaps history isn't a grand tale of battles and crowns after all, but a long sequence of small acts of care. You take another sip of tea, feeling its warmth bloom again through your chest. The kettle sighs softly behind you, as though satisfied with its work. The air is thick now with comfort, the perfume of tea, the smoky trace of candle wax, the damp scent of the storm fading beyond the window. Every element seems to hold a kind of conversation with time. You imagine for a moment what it might be like to sit in one of those old inns, your hands wrapped around a cup like this one, listening to strangers tell stories of faraway places. The room alive with quiet laughter, boots drying by the fire, dogs asleep beneath tables. Outside, the night stretches endlessly, but inside, the warmth is absolute. A single hearth could feel like the center of the universe. You look around the library now, the rows of books, the wavering light, the faint trail of steam rising from your cup, and realize that this, too, is a kind of inn, a resting place between centuries. The travelers here are ideas, and you are merely another passerby, pausing to warm your hands before moving on. You set the cup down carefully, watching the ripples settle. The steam curls upward one last time, catching the light like a small spirit before vanishing into the still air. The silence that follows feels sacred, like the closing of a chapter written not in ink, but in breath. You take a deep breath, savoring it, the warmth, the calm, the impossible nearness of the past. Somewhere, in the faint echo of the kettle's last sigh, you can almost hear the murmur of distant voices, the clink of mugs, the soft laughter of travelers long gone. As the last raindrop slides down the window pane, you lift your cup once more, honoring time, warmth, and all the quiet survivals that shape this moment, a soft tribute to patience, endurance, and the gentle persistence of life that carries us through centuries unnoticed yet unwavering. The rain has ended, leaving behind a faint shimmer on the window pane, a silver breath upon the glass. You stand beside it, cup still warm in your hand, watching the blurred reflection of candlelight flicker against the dim world outside. The library, with all its stillness and scent of ink, suddenly feels like a threshold, a place between here and elsewhere. Beyond the glass, in your imagination, the town awakens under the hush of night. You picture cobblestone streets slick with rain, the stones glistening faintly beneath the wheat-amber glow of an old street lamp. The light trembles in the mist, stretching itself into a thin golden veil that dissolves with every gust of wind. No one walks those streets now. The air itself seems to be holding its breath. You close your eyes, and in that stillness, your mind begins to wander. You imagine yourself stepping beyond the window, out into that quiet town. Your footsteps meet the cobblestones with a soft, hollow rhythm, the kind of sound that feels older than your own heartbeat. The night is cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and old stone. Somewhere in the distance, a shutter creaks. Then silence again. The path winds slowly past darkened doorways and shuttered windows. Faint wisps of smoke rise from the last dying fires within, tracing the sky like prayers. The houses lean slightly toward one another, their timbers darkened by centuries of rain and salt. You trail your fingers along the walls, rough, uneven, cool with the touch of time. It feels less like walking through a town, and more like walking through a dream that forgot it ever ended. In the faint glow ahead, a small archway opens to a wider street. You pause there, feeling the echo of steps that are not yours, pilgrims long gone who once walked this very road. Their sandals and staffs striking the same stones, their voices low with hymns and hope. The path you imagine now was once part of a pilgrimage route, leading through coastal towns toward shrines and relics, past markets and monasteries. It is strange to think of how many feet have passed here, how much faith and fear and longing have worn these stones smooth. The First Crusade began as a holy mission, yet its ripples reached far beyond faith. Trade routes shifted, languages mingled. Spices and silks found their way into ports that had never smelled such richness. Cities by the sea swelled with life. Venice, Genoa, Marseille, each one a mosaic of merchants, pilgrims, and mercenaries. Inns overflowed, coins changed hands faster than prayers were whispered, and maps were redrawn not just by kings, but by sailors with ink-stained fingers. Out of the chaos came new colors, new flavors, new ideas. The world grew wider and more uncertain. You think about that as you walk, tracing the same kind of roads that might have carried all of it, the ambition, the devotion, the misunderstanding. The night deepens. The lamps flicker, and somewhere a distant bell tolls, faint and slow. You stop beside a small stone bridge, arching over what used to be a stream. Beneath it now, only darkness flows, the memory of water. The reflection of the lamp sways gently on the surface, a trembling golden circle surrounded by endless black. You lean against the worn railing and breathe in. The air tastes of wet moss and distant wood smoke. For a fleeting second, you imagine another traveler standing beside you, centuries away, dressed in coarse wool and carrying a wooden staff polished by the miles. His eyes, too, might have followed this same path of light, wondering where it led. There is something timeless about walking at night, about letting your thoughts drift down roads that have no destination. You realize that pilgrimage doesn't always require faith. Sometimes it is simply a need to keep moving, to follow the faint glow ahead, even if you don't know who lit it. Your mind drifts toward the strange geometries of the world, the invisible lines said to cross it like threads in a loom. Ley lines, some call them, ancient pathways of energy connecting sacred places, standing stones, cathedrals, burial mounds. From the air, some old maps seem to suggest that these places align in impossible precision, as if drawn by a giant's compass. Historians argue about their meaning, coincidence, or something older than science dares to name. You imagine tracing one of those lines under your feet now, an invisible current humming beneath the cobblestones. Perhaps it runs from here to the forgotten abbey on the hill, to the sea cliffs beyond, or even farther, across continents, threading temples and tombs together in silent harmony. Maybe every pilgrim who ever walked felt it too, that faint pulse beneath the earth that says, keep going. The wind rises briefly, carrying the smell of rain and time. A loose shudder bangs, then falls quiet again. The mist thickens, softening the edges of everything, the stones, the lamps, even your own thoughts. The world feels suspended, as if holding itself still so the past can pass through unhindered. You walk on a little longer until the road narrows and bends out of sight. The last lamp burns weakly, its light trembling as if about to be swallowed by the night. You pause beneath it, looking up at the thin trail of moths circling the glow. Their wings flicker like tiny sparks in the air. You take one last breath of the cool, damp silence, and then slowly you begin to turn back. The way home feels softer now, less like a return, and more like the end of a long exhale. The world remains the same, but you are a fraction quieter inside. When you open your eyes again, you are back at the library window. The candle has burned lower, the tea long gone cold, but the image of the cobblestone road still lingers in your mind, like a secret path only visible at night. You smile faintly, not because of what you saw, but because of how still it felt. Somewhere in the gentle evening hum you picture the unseen pilgrim continuing onward, steady, unhurried, tracing the endless line of light that stretches quietly through time, guiding each step. With calm persistence, a reminder that some journeys move not with haste, but with quiet, enduring purpose. The candle has almost melted down to its base, a small, determined flame trembling in a pool of wax. Its faint glow paints the room in gold and shadow, and you find yourself watching it the way one might watch a thought take shape. The rain has stopped, leaving the air thick and fragrant with damp wood. Somewhere in that scent, you catch an echo of earth, of soil and moss, of something older than walls or ink. Your eyes drift toward the hearth, where a few coals still smolder faintly from earlier in the evening. You imagine a time before matches, before the neat strike of flint against steel was commonplace, a time when fire itself had to be coaxed, courted like a secret. The mind wanders easily there, to a forest in late autumn, where mist curls around the roots of old trees, and the ground is soft with rot and fallen leaves. You can almost see it, the figure of a traveler, cloaked damp from rain, kneeling beside a fallen birch. Their hands brush away layers of leaf and bark, until they find what they're researching for. A thick, hoof-shaped fungus growing from the dead wood. Hoof fungus, Fomes fomentarius, pale gray and leathery, clinging like memory to the trunk. It's strange to think that something born of decay could hold the promise of warmth. Yet this fungus was once a traveler's treasure, nature's matchbook. Dried and sliced thin, its inner flesh could be turned into amadou, a soft, fibrous tinder that catches even the faintest spark. To make it, one would soak the fungus in urine or ash, then beat it gently until it fluffed into a felt-like texture. Not elegant work, but patient and quietly miraculous. You imagine the pilgrim's fingers working slowly, rhythmically, turning a dull fungus into something that could breathe life into flame. The process feels meditative, each strike of the mallet, each twist of the fiber, an act of faith that light will come again. And when the spark finally catches, a tiny ember glowing deep in the amadou's heart, there must have been a moment of silent awe. You can almost feel it now, that pulse of warmth blooming against cold air, that faint crackle as smoke curls upward. A single ember glowing brighter, feeding on patience. And then the first flicker of fire, small, golden, fragile as breath. The traveler cups their hands around it, coaxing it gently until it steadies. That warmth, that flickering light, it is victory and comfort, survival and wonder all in one. For a moment, you can feel that same quiet satisfaction, sitting here in your own pool of lamplight. The world outside the window has gone completely dark, but inside there is fire, tamed, kind, alive. You think about how powerful fire once was, not just a comfort, but a danger so immense that cities had to learn to fear it. In medieval towns, where houses stood shoulder to shoulder and roofs were thatched with straw, a single spark could erase an entire neighborhood before dawn. By the 14th century, strict rules governed the use of open flames within city walls. In London, Paris, and Cologne, blacksmiths and bakers were ordered to keep their fires contained or extinguished after sundown. Night patrols roamed the streets, sniffing out smoke, their lanterns swinging like miniature moons. Even candles were taxed or limited in some districts. To possess fire was both necessity and risk, a privilege to be handled with reverence. And yet, humanity could never give it up. Fire was too human, too intimate. It was warmth and hunger and storytelling. It was the glow on a winter's face, the dance of shadows that made the walls seem alive. Every hearth was a small sun at the center of its own world. You sip the last of your tea, now cold, and feel the ghost of warmth linger in your throat. The fire in your mind still burns. The image of that ember catching light, the traveler's quiet satisfaction. And as your thoughts drift, they take an unexpected turn toward something stranger, something almost feverish in its energy. It's said that in 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a different kind of fire took hold, not one of flame, but of frenzy. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began to dance. No music, no partner, just an unending, unstoppable movement. Within days, dozens joined her, then hundreds. The city watched in disbelief as men and women danced for hours, then days, some collapsing, others dying where they stood. No one knew why. Some said it was mass hysteria, others a curse or divine punishment. Modern theories whisper about ergot poisoning, a fungus, again, growing on damp rye bread, releasing hallucinogenic toxins into the blood. The dance, in that sense, was a kind of madness born from mold, a cruel mirror to the fire of life, energy turned wild, uncontrollable. How strange that both salvation and suffering could grow from the same humble spores, one fungus bringing light, another chaos. Perhaps nature has always known how to keep her balance. You sit back, the thought lingering. The candle has almost gone out now, its last flame small but defiant. It wavers, then steadies, as if unwilling to surrender. Around you, The library returns to silence, the hush of pages, the soft hum of unseen currents. Somewhere, deep in that profound quiet, you imagine a lone ember glowing faintly in the forest, its light small, tentative, yet stubbornly alive. It waits for the next whisper of wind, a delicate spark that seems both fleeting and eternal at once. You sense in it something profoundly human, a quiet urge to create warmth, to kindle life and comfort, even in a world that can feel indifferent and cold. The candle before you flickers one last time, casting dancing shadows across the walls, before letting out a soft, final sigh. You whisper softly, almost to yourself, almost to the room. Every light begins as a secret, and in that hush, the secret lingers. It is a pulse of heat in the dark, a faint, enduring glow that reminds you that even the smallest, humblest acts, writing a word, tending a flame, sharing a thought, can burn with infinite wonder, quiet yet unstoppable. The library has grown quieter, as if the air itself has settled into a kind of listening. Only the faint ticking of the clock remains, patient, deliberate, like the heartbeat of the room. You lean back, the soft creak of the chair blending into the silence, and open the book before you. Its cover is thick, wrapped in old leather that smells of time, earthy, faintly smoky, with a whisper of the animal it once was. There's something deeply human about that scent. It carries both labor and patience, the kind of patience that once belonged to the tanners, the craftsmen who worked in the margins of medieval towns. You imagine them now, sleeves rolled up, hands darkened by the touch of bark and lime, standing beside long vats of water where hides soaked for weeks. The pages beneath your fingers feel warm and uneven, as though they've absorbed centuries of touch. You trace the edge of the leather binding, and it's easy to imagine the hand that shaped it, a steady, deliberate hand, one that knew how to coax roughness into grace. In your mind's eye, the scene unfolds slowly. A small tannery by a stream, its walls darkened by years of steam and smoke. The air is thick with the scent of bark, ash, and animal hide. Wooden beams drip with condensation. Sunlight filters through in narrow shafts, turning the haze into golden dust. The tanner stands by the workbench, a man of quiet strength and ritual. Every movement he makes is measured, born of repetition and care. He scrapes the hide with a curved knife, removing the last traces of fat and sinew, the sound a soft rasping rhythm, like breath on stone. Then he lowers it into a vat, filled with a mix of oak bark and water, the tannins slowly transforming the skin into something durable, something that will outlive its maker. It's not a glamorous craft. The work is long, the smell sharp, the reward modest. Yet there is a kind of reverence in it, the reverence of those who create things meant to endure. A tanner knows that time itself is one of his ingredients. He waits not hours, but weeks, watching the hides change color, soften, and take on that unmistakable resilience. You think of how rare that kind of patience has become, the quiet devotion to process, to imperfection, to rhythm. The modern world moves too quickly for the slow music of craft. But in this imagined place, there is no hurry. The only sound is the steady drip of water, the crackle of fire, the low hum of a craftsman humming to himself as he works. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. It's almost like a lullaby, the whisper of leather being stretched and polished, the thud of a mallet pressing seams, the faint gurgle of the stream outside. These are not the sounds of labor. They're the sounds of creation. In medieval towns, craftsmen like this did not work alone. They were part of something larger, the guilds, those intricate networks of skill and structure that defined the heartbeat of a city. Each guild, from blacksmiths to weavers to masons, was both a family and a fortress. They guarded their secrets fiercely, ensuring that only the worthy could learn the craft. The guilds dictated not only how goods were made, but how lives were shaped. Apprentices would enter as children, their names inked into dusty ledgers, and spend years learning from their masters. first sweeping floors, then shaping leather, then, finally, creating pieces of their own. They learned patience, precision, pride. When they were ready, they became journeymen, carrying their knowledge from town to town, building a reputation one stitch, one blade, one brick at a time. And above them all, the guild halls stood tall, not just as places of business, but of brotherhood. Within those walls, disputes were settled, prices agreed upon, and feasts held to honor the saints who watched over each craft. To belong to a guild was to belong to a tradition that reached backward and forward at once, a promise that your work would not vanish into the dust. Your eyes fall again to the leather binding of your book, and you realize that it, too, is part of that lineage. Some tanner's patient labor, some binder's steady hands, all converging in this single artifact resting beneath your fingertips. Time collapses into texture. You turn a page carefully, and something catches the light, the faint shimmer of an illustration, illuminated with colors so vivid they seem newly painted. Deep blues, impossible reds, gold that still glows after centuries. You tilt the page slightly, wondering how such color could survive so long. Historians have tried to recreate it, the secret of Gothic stained glass, of illuminated manuscripts whose hues refuse to fade. The reds of ruby glass, the blues of cobalt, the translucent greens, they shine today as if the sun itself is caught inside them. Yet modern chemists, with all their instruments and equations, still struggle to reproduce the same depth. It's said that the craftsmen who made them guarded their formulas with near religious devotion. Some whispered that the secret was in the sand, gathered only from certain riverbeds. Others said it was in the fire, that it had to burn at the exact temperature of prayer. And a few believed it was simply faith. That color, like soul, cannot be measured, only believed in. You sit there for a long time, the book open, the room dim, the smell of leather and dust mingling like incense. There's something soothing about it all. The idea that beauty can be born from patience, that light can live forever in glass. That craft is a kind of quiet immortality. Outside, the wind sighs against the window, carrying the faint scent of rain and distance. Inside, you rest your hand on the book's worn cover, feeling its warmth as though the centuries beneath it are still breathing. Somewhere, in the hush between the clock's tick and your heartbeat, you sense the old tanner's craft, not a sound, but a patient, earthy presence. You exhale, the room breathes with you, candlelight dancing on leather. In that quiet moment, you realize every act of making is also an act of remembering. The library seems taller tonight. Its ceiling stretches upward into a hush that feels almost sacred, and the candlelight flickers in soft spirals, climbing the columns of stone like hesitant memories. You tilt your head back, eyes tracing the slow sweep of the arches above, ribs of pale limestone meeting in intricate intersections, the architecture of patience itself. The air carries the scent of dust and cool mineral, that quiet fragrance of stone that has outlasted everything. Each breath feels like inhaling the centuries. The silence here isn't empty. It's layered, the kind of silence that has weight, as if time itself has chosen to rest. The old clock on the far wall ticks faintly, each sound spaced like drops of water echoing in a cave. Tick, tick, slow, deliberate, reverent. The rhythm makes you aware of your own heartbeat, its quiet counterpoint to the endless stillness of stone. You step closer to one of the pillars. Its surface is uneven, pitted in places where fingers and time have both worn it smooth. You rest your palm against it, and for a moment, you could almost believe it's alive, not in movement, but in memory. Each block, each vein of mineral, each faint chisel mark tells the story of the hands that shaped it. Somewhere high above, a cool draft weaves through the towering arches, and the faint hum of air reverberates against the vast dome. The sound is subtle but constant, like the building itself drawing a slow, steady breath. In that quiet resonance you feel the cathedral alive, as if every stone and pillar inhales and exhales alongside you, holding centuries of silence within its walls. You can almost see it being built, the first stones laid centuries ago by workers whose names are long forgotten. Masons and laborers, barefoot on scaffolds, lifting each block with pulleys and faith. Their tools were simple: hammers, chisels, ropes, hope. But their vision was vast. They were not building for themselves, or even for their children, but for generations yet unborn. Cathedrals, in those days, were not just structures. They were time made visible. To start one was to accept that you would never see it finished. The work would pass from hand to hand, decade after decade, as apprentices became masters, and masters turned to dust. Yet still, the building would rise. Imagine a mason standing here 500 years ago, carving a gargoyle high on the tower. He knows no one will ever see it closely, yet he shapes it carefully, each line precise. Perhaps he whistles as he works, thinking about the bread waiting at home, or the sound of his children's laughter. His life, his smallness, becomes part of something eternal. You glance up again at the arches. The shadows between the ribs seem deeper now, as though they hold the residue of all that time. The candlelight shivers against the stone, and for a fleeting instant, it feels like the whole building shifts, not in motion, but in age. It doesn't stand in time. It is time. The clock ticks again. Tick, tick. Each sound seems to take longer than the last. You begin to notice how sound itself behaves differently here, stretching, dissolving. The acoustics of stone turn seconds into echoes, and echoes into memory. You take a slow step backward and sit down again. The chair creaks softly beneath you. You can feel the rhythm of the place settling into your bones, patient, ancient, content. The candlelight dances faintly against the walls, casting brief, trembling halos that fade before you can focus on them. As your eyes drift toward the high windows, a thought comes to you, not of architecture, but of wonder. How strange it is, you think, that stone, which seems so solid, can also hold mystery. Not just the mystery of endurance, but of what it has witnessed. Wars, prayers, storms, whispers. The chronicles of old are filled with stories of the inexplicable, events that left people staring at the sky in awe. One such tale lingers in your mind, the phenomenon known as animal rain. It sounds like myth, yet it has been recorded for centuries. Frogs, fish, even small birds falling from the heavens during storms. In 16th century Spain, witnesses claimed to see eels drop from the clouds. In Japan, it was tadpoles. In Central Europe, tiny silver fish. Scholars debated, priests prayed, and the people simply stood in wonder, hands outstretched as life fell from the sky. Modern explanations speak of waterspouts and winds, of air currents strong enough to lift the smallest creatures from rivers and release them miles away. But even with science, there is something strangely poetic about it, the idea of the sky itself releasing a forgotten fragment of the earth, a reminder that what seems impossible might only be misunderstood. You imagine for a moment what it must have been like to stand in a square centuries ago under one of those strange rains. The bells of the cathedral tolling above, the stones glistening with water, the people frozen in astonishment, half in fear, half in faith. Perhaps this library, with its towering pillars and patient hush, is much the same. Here, nothing literal falls from above, no frogs or fish, but moments do. Memories, the gentle drizzle of history, seeping slowly into the cracks of your mind, leaving traces that shimmer quietly in the stillness between thought and time. The clock ticks once more. Tick, tick. You close your eyes, and the sound stretches outward, endless, folding over itself. Seconds no longer exist as separate beats. They merge into a single, continuous hum, the slow, patient rhythm of stone and time. You inhale deeply, the cool, weighty air filling your lungs, and for a moment, the world seems to pause. Or perhaps you have simply slowed enough to match its pace. Every tick resonates through the pillars, along the vaulted ceiling, through the dust motes that drift lazily in the light. Time feels tangible, pliant, and infinite, yet quietly gentle. The flame flickers low, then steadies. The stone holds its silence. And for one long, suspended heartbeat, the centuries are gone, replaced by the simple truth that everything, no matter how vast or enduring, is built one breath at a time. The night grows deeper, and the air inside the library carries that faint, woody scent of old paper and cold stone. Outside, the rain has slowed to a fine mist, whispering softly against the window panes. You sip the last of your tea, lukewarm now, and your gaze drifts to the small candle flame trembling beside you, a fragile warmth in the sea of quiet. Your mind wanders again to another kind of warmth, not of libraries or lamps, but of a small hearth in a peasant's hut many centuries ago. A single room of wattle and daub, smoke curling lazily upward through a hole in the thatch, and beside the fire someone sits cross-legged with a wooden bowl of acorns. Their hands move with deliberate rhythm, cracking, sorting, soaking. Each shell breaking marks time like a soft metronome, harmonizing with the rain outside. The air carries a faint bitterness of tannin, yet beneath it lingers the deep, grounding scent of patience, steady and unhurried, filling the quiet space. To make acorn flour is not a task for the hurried. It is the art of turning bitterness into sustenance, one careful wash at a time. The process begins with gathering, the slow walk through the forest, the cold crunch of leaves underfoot, the act of stooping again and again, each acorn chosen with care. In years of poor harvest, this simple act could mean survival. Once gathered, the acorns are shelled and crushed into coarse meal, then soaked or boiled repeatedly to leach out the tannins that make them unfit to eat. Each rinsing softens their bitterness, transforms them into something mild, nutty, and unexpectedly nourishing. You can almost see it, a clay pot bubbling gently over the hearth, steam mingling with wood smoke, the rhythmic motion of a wooden spoon. Outside, the wind moans softly through the trees, but inside, there's warmth and the slow, steadfast comfort of work that connects the living to the land. The flour, once dried, is ground fine and kneaded into dough. The smell of bark bread, that strange, humble loaf made from a mix of tree bark, acorn flour, and coarse grain, rises from the oven. It is not the bread of feasts or abundance, but of endurance. A bread that carries with it the story of hunger, ingenuity, and the will to live. There was a time when such bread was not a choice, but a necessity. During the great famine of the early 14th century, between 1315 and 1317, much of Europe starved beneath skies of endless rain. Crops rotted in the fields, livestock perished, and entire villages were abandoned to the cold. Chroniclers wrote of people eating roots, grass, even the bark from trees. In such times, the forest itself became a pantry for the desperate. Acorns, chestnuts, nettles, the overlooked gifts of the wild, turned from mere curiosities into the backbone of survival. Some historians still debate whether the main driver of the Great Famine was purely climatic or exacerbated by existing social and land-use structures. Perhaps it was both, the heavens closing and the hierarchies failing in unison. Yet through that long hunger, what survived was not wealth, but knowledge. The quiet, ancestral memory of how to live when the world forgot how to feed you. How to find food where others saw only forest floor. How to keep your hands busy, your hearth warm, your hope alive. You picture again the peasant by the fire, perhaps a woman, her hands worn and cracked, humming a tune as she stirs the pot. She does not think of famine or history. She thinks only of her family asleep in the corner, and of morning. Her rhythm is steady, unhurried. Her craft humble, yet sacred in its persistence. The library's hush follows a steady, patient rhythm. Each turning page, Each whispered exhale of time reminds you that survival is as much about memory as endurance. To survive is to carry forward the quiet practices of those who came before, the simple arts that require no brilliance, only care and grace. In this gentle passing of knowledge, the ordinary becomes sacred, and the act of remembering itself becomes a lifeline linking past to present and ensuring that what truly matters endures softly, steadily like dust dancing in a shaft of light. As you sit there, the candle flame flickers, and in its reflection, you imagine her movement, the swirl of steam, the creak of the wooden spoon, the faint hum of an old song. A song that has no name, no melody written down, only the steady pulse of existence beneath hardship. Your eyes fall on an old leather-bound volume near your elbow, its spine cracked, its title long faded. When you open it, the pages bloom with indecipherable script and strange illustrations, looping vines, celestial symbols, unrecognizable plants. You pause. It's as though the book is whispering from a place between knowledge and dream. Could it be? The Voynich manuscript, that infamous enigma of medieval ink and imagination. A text that no one, not scholars nor machines, has ever translated. Its words glide like fish through the water of time, just beyond human reach. Some claim it's a code, others a hoax, or the product of a mind drifting between worlds. But as you gaze at its swirling glyphs, it feels instead like a mirror, reflecting the same mystery that lives in every act of old survival. The patience of those who learn to turn the inedible into sustenance, the incomprehensible into beauty. You close the book gently. The library settles into stillness again. Outside, the rain has stopped, leaving only the faint scent of wet earth drifting through the open window. In that still, amber-lit moment, you realize survival, whether against famine, time, or oblivion, is always a transformation. The acorn is ground into bread. The unknown is shaped into story. Bitterness is alchemized into something sustaining, passed gently across generations. The candle flicker's dust motes drift in lazy arcs, and you find yourself whispering a quiet truth, not to the shelves, not to the worn pages, but to the air itself. Patience is its own feast, a subtle, enduring nourishment. In that pause, the centuries feel close, and you understand that enduring is as gentle as it is vital, as quiet as the light. The candle has burned low, its flame trembling as though uncertain whether to keep breathing. The pages before you glow faintly in the amber light, words leaning into one another like tired travelers. For a long moment, you simply sit, listening to the slow rhythm of your own heartbeat and the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath the chair. The air inside has grown warm, heavy with the scent of old parchment and cooling tea. You glance toward the tall window at the far end of the room, the one veiled by thin, aged curtains. Without quite thinking, you rise and walk to it, each step echoing softly across the library's vast hush dot when you push the latch open. The night exhales. A cool breeze drifts in, brushing past your face and stirring the edges of forgotten papers. It smells of rain-soaked stone, of grass, of something distant and clean. You close your eyes, inhaling deeply. The library, once still and self-contained, now feels alive, breathing with the rhythm of the world beyond its walls. Outside, the sky unfolds like dark velvet, stitched with countless stars. The town below sleeps under a gentle quiet, the streets glimmering faintly where lanterns still burn. Somewhere, a church bell marks the passing of another hour, slow, deliberate, as if even time itself has learned to whisper. You lean against the window frame, the wood cool under your palm, and gaze upward. How strange it is, you think, that in the same centuries when peasants ground acorns for bread, others, scholars and dreamers, were gathering beneath vaulted halls, tracing words onto parchment that would outlast their own bones. It was in the 11th and 12th centuries that Europe began to stir again. The age of the first universities, Bologna, Paris, Oxford. Born not from luxury, but from a hunger of a different kind, the hunger to understand. To gather knowledge, not as hoarded wealth, but as shared light. You imagine a young scholar of that age, quill in hand, eyes weary from candlelight, leaning over a text written centuries before him. The faint scratching of ink upon vellum. The murmur of Latin drifting through narrow halls. The smell of dust and thought mingling together. The same stars that shine above you now once look down on him too, perhaps through the same open window, on another sleepless night. The thought sends a quiet shiver through your spine, that the act of learning, of searching, is a thread unbroken through time. You take another breath. The air is crisp, carrying faint traces of the countryside beyond town. Maybe wood smoke, maybe the faint perfume of some nocturnal bloom. It reminds you that even stone buildings, for all their weight and silence, are never truly cut off from the living world. They breathe, too, in their own way. Somewhere among the tall, endless shelves behind you, a candle flickers softly. For a moment, the little flame leans toward the open window, as if drawn by the cool night air. Its golden light dances across the spines of old books, casting long, gentle shadows that sway with the rhythm of the quiet room. Your thoughts wander, as they often do in these still hours. You think of stories whispered in history, tales of people who stepped outside time itself. Legends speak of travelers lost in enchanted forests, waking centuries later, unchanged, while the world around them transformed. Others tell of monks so deep in meditation that time seemed to forget them. Dust hung in the air, light paused, and the world held its breath. Old scholars wrote these stories not as fantasy, but as riddles of existence. What if time, like a careful breath, sometimes falters? What if there are moments so still, so complete, that the universe pauses, caught between one heartbeat and the next? In those moments, even the smallest things feel alive. You feel a quiet comfort in this thought. Maybe the world pauses sometimes, allowing itself a moment of rest. In that pause, even you become part of a gentle, slow rhythm. You breathe slowly, listening to the quiet, letting your thoughts settle. Outside, the wind moves softly through the trees, carrying a steady, ancient hum. You feel it on your skin, cool and gentle. Far off, an owl calls once, then silence returns. The stars above seem closer, leaning toward the quiet world below, watching and listening dot in the space between pages and sky, between the ticking clock and still breath. Something inside you eases. Survival is not just fire, food, or shelter. It is opening a window, letting the night in, and remembering that the world is larger than walls and older than words. The candle flickers once, twice, then steadies. Its light shines like tiny stars reflected in the room. You lean closer, whispering almost to yourself. The air tonight remembers everything. The breeze drifts through, brushing your hair and cheek, then slips away. As if answering your thought, you pause, inhaling deeply, letting the cool night air and the distant stars fill your lungs. Slowly, you close the window halfway, not to shut out the world, but to hold its voice gently, letting it linger around you like a soft companion in the quiet evening dot. For a long moment, you simply sit and listen. The candle burns steadily, the wind hums softly, and the room feels alive with patience. Outside, the night moves slowly, quietly, as if giving everything time to rest. And you rest with it, part of the gentle rhythm of life. The quiet stays with you, soft and calm. You feel the world wide and patient, older than your words, larger than your walls. And in that quiet, you know something important. Life is not only surviving. It is noticing, breathing, listening, and letting the world speak to you. night has grown tender, that soft hour when even shadows seem to exhale. The candle beside you burns lower now, its light forming a golden pool over the wooden table. Your fingers rest on the worn spine of a book, one whose leather cover has faded into the color of dusk itself. There is no title, only a faint embossed circle, perhaps once a symbol, now eroded by time. You open it carefully, and the pages sigh, a dry, whispering sound like distant wind through tall grass. Inside lies a bestiary, its illustrations simple yet mesmerizing. The first creature you see is neither lion nor lamb, but something in between, a shape imagined by someone who had seen only fragments of both. The body of a feline, the eyes of a saint, the mane curling like waves of gold. Its claws rest on an orb of blue, labeled in Latin as virtus in pace, strength in peace. You smile. The artist's hand, though untrained by modern eyes, carries a certain tenderness, every stroke deliberate, filled with reverence rather than precision. You turn another page. A unicorn, drawn with an almost childlike earnestness. Its horn spirals unevenly. Its hooves float slightly above the ground, as though reluctant to touch the dust of the world. Beneath it, an inscription, Puritas non timit ignem. Purity does not fear the fire. You trace the words lightly with your fingertip, feeling the indentation of ink pressed into vellum long ago. The script trembles faintly, as though the quill had been held by someone who half believed what they drew, and half feared it. The colors, though faded, still glow softly, reds dulled to rose, blues to shadowed gray, gold leaf glinting faintly where light still remembers it. Each creature feels both strange and familiar, like dreams captured by hands that had never seen the real thing. You think of those medieval minds, people who saw mystery in every wingbeat and ripple of water. They painted what they couldn't explain. Dragons curled in the earth's veins, fish with faces of men, birds that rose from fire and ashes doffed to them. The world was vast and alive, full of whispers and warnings. Every forest might hide a saint or a serpent. Every breeze might carry an omen dot. You turn to another page and pause. This one shows a griffin, its beak sharp as justice, its wings stretched wide over a sleeping city. The caption beneath reads, Costas Silenti, Guardian of Silence. How fitting. You think, for a night like this, the candle crackles softly beside you, and the smell of old ink mingles with the faint trace of smoke. You imagine the monk or scribe who once bent over this very page, robe brushing the floor, quill dipped in ink brewed from soot, resin, and egg whites. Perhaps he worked through winter nights, hands numb, mind wandering through his own imagination of beasts that might never have been. What did he think of as he drew a dragon's scales, one by one? Did he fear it? Did he believe it? Or did he simply enjoy the rhythm of the brush, the meditation of form and color, unaware that centuries later, someone would sit in a quiet room, tracing his thoughts with gentle awe? Outside, the wind shifts, and a faint cool draft curls around your ankles. The flame flickers, briefly illuminating the corners of the room, the shelves, the scattered papers, the faint breath of dust rising like pale smoke. Your eyes return to the bestiary. Between the pages, a small scrap of parchment has been left, a note, perhaps, or a fragment of another text. You unfold it with care. The ink has almost vanished, but one line remains legible. The smallest threads hold the world together. You pause. The phrase could have been metaphor, or something more literal. And somehow, your mind drifts to another old practice, one both strange and beautiful dot in the quiet ages of herbal medicine. Healers once used spider soap to bind wounds. They would gather it delicately, pressing it into cuts and scratches. It was soft, nearly invisible, yet astonishingly strong, and its natural resistance to infection made it a secret ally against time and decay. The image lingers, a healer by lamplight, brushing away a web from a dark corner, not to destroy it, but to save it. There's something poetic about that, how even the smallest, most fragile creation could serve the act of healing. You look again at the creatures on the page, unicorns, dragons, griffins, and suddenly they feel less like fantasies and more like metaphors for the same human instinct, the need to make sense of wonder. The urge to turn fear into story. Every creature is an attempt to describe something invisible: courage, purity, greed, hope. And perhaps, in doing so, those early artists created a mirror for themselves, a reflection of their own inner beasts and saints. The candle trembles once more, its flame bending toward the open book as if curious. Shadows of wings and tails dance briefly across the walls, flickering between reality and dream. You close the bestiary slowly. The sound it makes, that soft, tired rustle, feels like a sigh from another century. For a while, you just sit there, hands resting atop its cover, feeling its quiet pulse beneath the leather. The room feels alive with the faint echo of imagined roars and soft hooves dot, and in the hush that settles afterward, you murmur to no one in particular, the world is never empty. It simply waits to be noticed. The candlelight steadies, casting a gentle glow. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere, unseen, the universe continues its patient turning slow, deliberate, teeming with beings that may never have truly existed, yet somehow linger in the quiet folds of time, always present, always waiting to be imagined and remembered. The candle has nearly burned itself to the end. Its flame, frail and trembling, casts a small golden halo that quivers across the desk. Around it, shadows bloom and retreat, long, liquid shapes that stretch across the bookshelves and melt into the corners of the room. The silence is so complete now that you can hear the soft hiss of the wick, the faint crackle as wax meets air. You lift your gaze toward the ceiling, where the light flickers against the stone ribs above. The hour has grown impossibly late. It's the kind of stillness that feels almost sacred when time itself seems to hesitate before stepping forward again. You think about light, this small, fragile miracle that has followed humanity through every darkness. Before the world of electricity and hum, there were lamps of bone and tallow. Small vessels of necessity and ingenuity dot in your mind's eye. You see it clearly. A bone oil lamp, carved from the hollow of an ox femur, polished smooth by hand. Inside, rendered animal fat burns slowly, giving off a warm, buttery glow. The air smells faintly of smoke and earth, a scent both comforting and ancient. The flame dances in its shallow cradle, alive yet humble. It illuminates little more than a few feet ahead, but somehow that's enough. Enough to sew, to write, to pray, to remember. It's a simple truth. When the world was darker, people learned to make do with what they had. Every scrap of bone, every drop of fat, every flicker of light was precious. Nothing wasted, nothing taken for granted. You can almost hear the quiet rhythm of life in those dimly lit cottages, the sound of a mother humming softly while mending a tunic by the glow of bone oil. A blacksmith counting coins beside the hearth. A child tracing patterns in the soot on the wall. Each gesture small, but radiant in its endurance. Tallow, made from rendered animal fat, was the light of common folk. Unlike beeswax candles, reserved for churches and nobility, tallow candles smoked, sputtered, and filled rooms with a faint, oily scent. Yet they were life itself after dusk. Entire guilds and small industries grew around their making, boiling vats of fat in the chill morning air, shaping the fragile torches of civilization. And still, even this crude light carried grace. There was a kind of reverence in tending to it, in trimming the wick, in shielding the flame from wind, and watching it burn slow and steady through the long, unbroken night. Back in the library, the candle flickers again, and for a heartbeat, the room transforms. Shadows of the shelves grow tall and wavering, like trees in a deep forest. The pages on your desk ripple gently in the breath of warm air that rises from the flame. It's beautiful. This instability, how the light is never still, always in motion, always alive. You think of all the hands that once lived by this same glow, the scribes, the shepherds, the wanderers. For them, night was not an enemy, but a companion. The darkness was vast, yes, but also gentle. It held space for thought, for silence, for dreams. And perhaps that is why so many strange stories were born in those hours, when sight was limited. and imagination filled the gaps left by light. One such tale drifts through your memory, the story of a man who claimed to have seen a city in the clouds. It was said that on a calm morning somewhere along the coast of Portugal, he stood alone on a cliff and watched as an entire city, towers, streets, domes, appeared suspended in the sky above the sea. He saw its lights shimmer, its windows glint like fireflies in mist. For a few precious minutes, it hung there, silent and perfect, before fading into the blue. The account was so vivid that a Portuguese nobleman recorded it in his journal, taking it not as madness, but as a phenomenon to be studied. Others later called it a fata morgana, a mirage born from layers of warm and cool air-bending light. Yet something about the story refuses to settle into science. It still feels like a message, a reminder that the world is capable of wonder, even when explained. A faint smile touches your lips. Perhaps each flame, each shimmering reflection, is a gentle mirage, a play of light revealing not reality, but the quiet images of what we most long to see and hold. The candle dips lower. A single bead of wax trembles at its edge, then falls soundlessly onto the desk. You watch it harden into a tiny pearl, proof of time passing in silence. Outside, the night has deepened into velvet. Through the window, the stars shimmer faintly, cold and distant. But in here, this little flame feels enough, a small rebellion against the void. You reach out, cupping your hand around it, and the light bends, spilling warmth over your skin. There's comfort in that gesture, the knowledge that even in solitude, light remains something shared. When finally the wick sputters and the flame sighs out, the darkness that follows is not empty. It is full of echoes, of every candle that ever burned, every lamp that ever guided someone through the unknown. You linger a moment longer, eyes adjusting to the dim, sensing the gentle return of stillness. Then you murmur softly into the darkness. Light never truly dies, it merely changes form. In the quiet that follows, you imagine a distant flame awakening somewhere else, a flickering bone lamp casting its soft glow, reaching across centuries. Your light and that one meet in an unspoken dialogue, a quiet conversation of warmth and persistence that threads through the night, linking past and present in a single enduring pulse. The fire is dying. What remains in the hearth are slow, pulsing embers, tiny red hearts breathing beneath the blackened logs. Their faint glow flickers across the floor, trembling like candlelight trapped in ash. You pull the wool blanket higher over your shoulders, feeling the air begin to cool around you. The room has grown quieter now, so quiet that even the smallest sounds become intimate. The tick 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 of the cooling stones, the delicate crack as another ember collapses inward. The scent of charred wood lingers, sweet and smoky, like a half-forgotten memory of autumn. You turn a page. The paper rustles softly, emotion enough to stir a ghost of warm air toward your face. You read slowly, not chasing meaning, but letting each word drift through your thoughts like leaves on a stream. The book's spine creaks in rhythm with the fire's fading breath, and for a moment, it feels as though both you and the story are dissolving into the same stillness. There is comfort in this gentle decline, the way warmth gives way to chill, the way the night deepens. It reminds you of how all things fade in their time, not abruptly, but with grace. The fire knows when to rest. So does the body. You shift slightly, tucking your feet closer to the hearth. The stone beneath radiates a soft, lingering heat. You imagine the hundreds of winters this room must have seen, generations gathering here, telling stories while the world outside slept under snow. Each flame, each spark, another heartbeat in the long memory of the house. Somewhere in that chain of memory lies the shadow of a darker fire, one that consumed not wood, but entire cities, entire lives. You think of the Black Death, the great plague that swept across Europe in the 14th century, silent and merciless. A sickness that traveled faster than any army, leaving villages emptied, fields untended, and prayers unanswered. The chronicles speak of carts filled with the dead, of monks who dug graves until their hands bled, of whole towns abandoned overnight. Yet amid the horror, something else endured, the human will to rebuild, to keep the fire alive. From that devastation, Europe was reshaped. Old hierarchies fractured, labor gained value. New ideas of medicine and faith began to grow God. It's strange how even catastrophe has its quiet architects of change. Like embers, faint but persistent, refusing to die completely. You close your eyes for a moment and let the warmth against your legs anchor you. The fire is nearly gone now, its light dimming to a dusky amber. The silence deepens, but it's not empty. It's full of small, living sounds. The soft creak of the chair, the slow settling of wood, the distant sigh of the wind pressing against the shutters. You reach for your mug, the last of the tea gone lukewarm, and take a small sip anyway. The bitterness feels grounding, a tether to the present. You exhale, watching the thin mist of your breath catch the last glow of the hearth. On the mantel above, a carved gargoyle stares down, its stone eyes frozen in eternal watchfulness. The figure is crude but powerful, wings folded, mouth open in a silent snarl. You've seen hundreds like it on the facades of old cathedrals, grotesque, haunting, yet strangely protective. Scholars often say gargoyles were practical first, rainspouts, designed to keep water from eating away at the stone walls. But the older stories suggest something deeper, something sacred. They were the guardians of the threshold, meant to frighten away evil spirits. To remind all who entered that the line between the holy and the profane was thin and worth defending. There's poetry in that idea, that even monsters can serve the light. You look back at your book. The words blur slightly as your eyes grow heavy. You read a sentence again, slower this time, letting its rhythm settle into the room. Every warmth is temporary, but its memory lingers like smoke in the rafters. Outside, the wind shifts, brushing against the shutters with a low moan. You can almost imagine the gargoyle above the window leaning forward, listening, a sentinel made of stone and silence. Your blanket slides a little from your shoulder. You pull it close again. The air has grown cooler now, almost cold, but the kind that invites sleep rather than discomfort. The embers in the hearth still glow faintly, like old stars refusing to dim. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you think about the monks who copied texts by candlelight through the worst of the plague. Years, their ink freezing in winter, their breath visible in the air, yet still they wrote. The quiet persistence of that act feels like this moment, small, human, and luminous in its simplicity. The last coal surrenders with a soft, almost wistful sigh. The hearth exhales its final warmth, brushing gently against your hands before fading entirely into darkness. You sit quietly, letting your eyes adjust to the pale silver of moonlight filtering through the window panes. The book on your lap lies half-read, its story paused, not abandoned, a gentle reminder that even unfinished journeys hold value. There is a profound calm in this pause. The heat of the fire may have vanished, but its memory lingers, woven into the stillness of the room, echoing softly across the quiet night. You draw the blanket closer around your shoulders, feeling the familiar weight like a protective embrace, and let your thoughts drift slowly, untethered, as if floating with smoke that no longer rises. Minutes stretch and fold into one another. The hush of the night, the residual warmth of the room, and the lingering scent of ash create a cocoon of serenity. Sleep comes gradually, softly, like fine ash settling after flame, carrying you into rest with gentle inevitability. The last ember in the hearth has gone out, yet the warmth still lingers in your bones, a ghost of fire rather than the flame itself. You sit quietly in the dimness, listening to the steady rhythm of your own breath. On the table before you lies a map, its parchment yellowed, its ink faded to the color of dust dot at first glance. It looks almost blank, a scatter of faint lines and names barely legible. But as the candlelight steadies, the shapes emerge, winding paths, delicate like veins beneath old skin. Roads once alive with footsteps, hooves, and wheels now only remembered through ink and patience. You trace a finger along one route, a trail curling from the east like smoke, the ancient Silk Road, they called it. More than a road, it was a heartbeat stretched across continents. Through deserts and mountains, from the cities of Xi'an and Samarkand to the ports of the Mediterranean, it carried not just silk and spices, but whispers of philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and myth. You imagine the caravans, the soft clatter of camels' hooves on stony ground, the rhythmic sway of goods wrapped in fabric, the smell of dust and saffron and sweat, traders speaking in tongues that blurred together under the sun. Somewhere in the noise, a child laughs. Somewhere else, a song is hummed in a dialect that will vanish within a century. How strange. That commerce, often thought to be the language of greed, was once the quietest form of connection. Every trade, every bargain, every bundle of cloth carried not just profit, but fragments of worlds meeting for the first time. You sit back, imagining those invisible paths still pulsing beneath the modern world, highways paved over ancient trails, ships crossing the same seas under new flags. Even now, the flow continues, unseen but unbroken. Yet tonight, the town outside your window is utterly still. No merchants shout in the square. No wagons rumble through the cobbled streets. The air feels clear, rinsed clean of movement. Shops shuttered, signs swaying lightly in the night breeze. It is the kind of silence that comes only after long labor, the collective exhale of a town that has spent its day trading, bargaining, surviving. You can almost hear the echo of coins clinking in the dark, the faint memory of negotiation hanging like incense in the air. And then nothing. Only the sound of your own breath, the faint scratch of pen against parchment dot in that quiet. You think of how commerce has always been less about wealth and more about exchange, the flow of human intention, from one place to another. Spices for silver, silk for stories, gold for belief. The Silk Road wasn't merely a route of trade. It was a corridor of transformation. Religions journeyed there too, Buddhism eastward, Islam and Christianity westward, their teachings slipping across borders, long before maps could name them. Empires rose and fell along its arteries. And yet the road itself, the idea of connection, endured. You look again at the parchment. The edges are frayed, the ink cracked, but something about it feels alive, as though those old roots are still breathing somewhere beneath your fingertips. And then your thoughts drift further, to Atlantis, the lost island said to have vanished beneath the sea. A civilization, advanced and luminous, gone in a single night of fury. Some believe it was real, that beneath the waves of the Atlantic, or the sands of the Sahara, lie the remains of that impossible city. Others call it allegory, a moral story wrapped in myth. But perhaps you think Atlantis never needed to exist in stone. Perhaps it survives in the way trade and memory intertwine, in the way every vanished port, every forgotten market, becomes a kind of sunken city beneath history's tides. There's comfort in that thought. That disappearance is not always loss, but transformation. You pour a little more tea, though it has long gone cold. The act itself is enough, the slow motion of hand to cup, the sound of liquid meeting porcelain. In this stillness, you feel connected to every merchant who once paused by the fire after a long journey, marking routes in sand and dreaming of home. A breeze pushes through the half-open window. It rustles the edges of the old map, lifting the corners slightly, as if the parchment is eager to move again, to remember motion. Trade, purpose. You steady it with your hand, and your shadow falls across a cluster of faint markings. There, on the western edge, a note scrawled in another hand, smaller, rushed. Templar route unknown, treasury lost beyond the straits. You smile faintly. The Knights Templar, those warrior monks who once protected pilgrims and caravans alike, had become legends of their own. Some historians still debate whether their sudden wealth was truly based on modern banking or on the recovery of ancient treasures, gold hidden in crypts, maps etched into walls, secrets traded not for coin, but for silence. You run your fingers over the words, imagining those secret networks, not of merchants this time, but of knowledge and faith. Even power, you realize, travels like trade. Invisible paths of influence connecting the unseen. The candle trembles. Its light flares, then softens again. The air smells faintly of parchment and wax, an ancient scent, older than the books themselves. You close your eyes. And in the darkness, the world unfolds. Deserts glowing under stars. Caravans moving like constellations across the earth. The slow hum of languages blending into one. Every trade, every road, every whispered bargain, all part of a single human rhythm. And somewhere in that rhythm, between the breath of one traveler and the next, lies the faint heartbeat of connection, not bound by time, but endlessly crossing the invisible paths of the world. Midnight arrives without ceremony. No chime marks it, no whispered announcement, only a gentle dissolving of all sound, a soft erasure of the library's life. The rustle of pages, the crackle of the dying fire, even the small sighs of the room itself have vanished, leaving a silence so complete it feels tangible. The air hangs heavy, yet tender, like a velvet curtain drawn over the world, pressing softly against your skin. You sit motionless, sensing the weight of stillness. It is cool, invisible, and absolute. The faint aroma of ash and old paper lingers, a memory of warmth now gone. Outside the window, the town slumbers beneath a dense, unmoving darkness. No footsteps echo. No carts rattle over cobblestones. No wind threads through the shutters. Only your breath pulses, a slow, deliberate mark of time. Inhaling deeply, you feel the chill of night fill your lungs, but it is more than air. It is stillness itself, seeping inward. Thoughts, heartbeat, memory, even the faintest stirrings of awareness slow, fold, and stretch until nothing remains, but presence. Your eyes roam over the towering bookshelves. Shadows soften at the edges, every volume exhaling a fragment of its own history. Yet even those whispers are asleep. You understand, with quiet awe, that this silence is not empty. It has its own resonance, subtle and profound, a sound that exists only when everything else has paused, a sound that is the heartbeat of the night itself. Not a tone you can name, but a deep undercurrent, like the echo of eternity folded into the air dot. In medieval towns, stillness was enforced by law. When the evening bell tolled, fires were doused, candles snuffed curfew. Cover the fire meant precisely that. The night belonged not to people, but to darkness itself, commanded and absolute, leaving the world to its quiet and shadowed rhythms. You imagine it now, a walled city, its narrow lanes swallowed by blackness, doors barred, torches extinguished. Only the watchmen move, their steps deliberate, echoing faintly on cobblestones. Inside, families huddle by the cooling hearth, eyes adjusting to the dark, whispering prayers before surrendering to sleep. It must have been both frightening and beautiful, that collective surrender to silence. A society in unison with night. Here, in this library, centuries later, you feel a faint echo of that rhythm. The last candle beside you has shrunk to a stub, its flame trembling as if unsure whether to continue. You could snuff it out and let the true darkness take over, complete the curfew. You pause, hand trembling slightly, and reach toward the candle. One soft breath stirs the wick. It wavers, flickers, then surrenders. Instantly, darkness swells, complete and absolute, folding the room into itself, leaving only the quiet weight of absence where light once lingered. At first, it feels disorienting, the kind of dark that wipes away edges, that folds the world into itself. But then your senses adjust. The faint shimmer of moonlight finds its way through the tall window, tracing soft silver lines across the wooden floor. Dust motes glimmer like drifting constellations before vanishing again. You close your eyes, but it hardly matters. The library has transformed into a living, silent being, each shelf, each beam, each lingering scent of paper and wood breathing with you. Time feels suspended, endless, as if the room itself waits patiently, timeless and aware, enveloping every part of you. Somewhere in that vast stillness, your thoughts begin to wander towards something older, stranger. You recall reading about a relic, a shield of Iska, a Roman artifact unearthed in fragments near the ruins of Carlearn. Bronze enameled, impossibly intricate. What baffled archaeologists wasn't its craftsmanship, but its imagery, spirals of unknown symbols, figures both human and animal, merging into one another in patterns that defied sense. Some claimed it depicted constellations long vanished from the night sky. Others whispered that it belonged to a forgotten cult, a sect that worshipped silence itself as the truest form of divinity. The idea lingers with you now that perhaps silence is not absence, but presence of the most profound kind, the world beneath sound, the space where everything begins. You open your eyes again. The moon has shifted, laying a soft square of light across the map you left on the table. Its parchment gleams faintly, as if remembering your touch from earlier. The air has grown colder still, but it feels kind. You inhale slowly, then exhale. Each breath no longer disrupts the stillness. It becomes part of it, a subtle rhythm woven into the quiet of the library. In that suspended moment, something extraordinary occurs. The boundaries between your body and the room blur. You are no longer separate from the air, the wood, the lingering scent of paper and ash. The library stretches outward, vast and breathing, and you are merely one gentle inhalation in its expanse. Time does not march here. It hovers, soft and patient. Perhaps this is what the monks felt in the hours past midnight, when prayer dissolved thought, leaving only pure awareness. Peace descends like light, quiet yet complete. You imagine the generations who obeyed curfew, their fires dimmed, hearts steady, sitting just as you do now. Across centuries, silence may have been the only shared language, the truest form of understanding between souls who would never meet. You breathe again. Impossibly soft, yet it resonates through the vast space like a sacred echo. Moonlight shifts, spilling gently across the table, deepening the hour, and the world holds still so completely that even memory seems reluctant to move in this moment. You realize you have not merely entered silence, you have become it. The mind softens, the body relaxes, and the velvet quiet of midnight enfolds you fully. Infinite, gentle, and without end, it embraces you like a presence older than time itself. At first, you think it's just the wind, a faint, almost imperceptible hum, slipping through the cracks of the ancient library window. But it steadies, gathers substance, and takes shape. It becomes unmistakably human. A chant rises, slow and deep, flowing like a hidden river beneath the stones, filling the air with a rhythm that is both ancient and eternal, weaving through the silence like a pulse you can almost touch. You hold your breath, listening. The sound seems to come from nowhere and everywhere, perhaps from the monastery on the hill, or perhaps only from memory, the echo of prayers layered through centuries of stone. Each note lingers, then melts into the next, creating a rhythm beyond time. A single voice joined by others, weaving harmony from devotion. The Latin syllables rise and fall like tides, measured, patient, unhurried. It is not music for the ears, but for the bones, a vibration you feel before you understand. You close your eyes, and the library changes. The silence that wrapped the room a moment ago now feels alive, vibrating with the breath of invisible monks. Their robes shift softly as they bow. Their candles flicker with the rhythm of the chant. The melody folds through the air, circular, eternal, a hymn older than the language it's sung in. For a moment, you imagine yourself within those cloisters, the cool stone corridors lined with shadow, the scent of beeswax and damp parchment, the steady pulse of prayer marking the hours. Outside, the world turns with its chaos and wars. But here, inside the monastery walls, time stands still. That was their sanctuary. Rhythm as structure, devotion as discipline, stillness as strength. It was within such monasteries that the world's memory survived. While empires crumbled and plague swept across lands, Monks sat beneath guttering lamps, copying texts by hand, line by line, word by word. The scriptorium was their battlefield, the quill their weapon against forgetting dot through their patience, philosophy, and science endured. The words of Aristotle, Galen, Augustine, and unknown poets found safety beneath their quiet hands. In every manuscript you've ever read, you could almost feel their breath pressed between the lines, centuries old, exhalations of faith and endurance. You imagine one such monk, stooped over parchment in the candlelight, his fingers stained with ink, his back bent from hours of devotion. Outside, the night howls with wind, but he does not look up. The world can end. His task remains. His chant, even silent, continues, a metronome of duty dot, and perhaps it is his ghostly rhythm you hear now, still circling the earth, still whispering through the stones. The chant swells for a moment, then softens, dissolving into something almost wordless. You cannot tell if it comes from your memory or from beyond the hills, yet it feels profoundly real. The effect is peace. It seeps into you, a calm that has nothing to do with tiredness or thought. You inhale deeply, feeling each breath align with the chant's rhythm, slow, deliberate, sacred. The heart adjusts itself to match. This, you realize, is what the monks must have known, that silence and sound were never opposites, but reflections of each other. That prayer was not about asking, but listening until the world itself answered back. Faint moonlight falls on the open book, making the centuries-old ink glimmer like wet paint. For a moment, you imagine the letters humming softly, tiny vibrations of devotion preserved on the page. Your gaze eases, your mind drifts, and the quiet of the library wraps around you like a gentle sigh. And then, without warning, an image surfaces in your mind, a cup gleaming faintly in the dark. The Holy Grail, that eternal symbol of seeking. Not the jeweled chalice of legend, perhaps, but something simpler, a clay vessel, worn, unremarkable, yet filled with infinite meaning. The Grail's true mystery was never its material form. Scholars, mystics, and kings searched for it across centuries, through deserts and cathedrals, but perhaps they all missed the point. The Grail wasn't meant to be found, but remembered. It was a mirror, reflecting the one who sought it. Perhaps that is why the monks sang. Their chant wasn't a plea for discovery, but a rhythm of remembrance, a way to keep the divine from fading into silence. You open your eyes once more. The sound is still there, faint yet unwavering, like a heartbeat resonating somewhere beyond the thick stone walls. Each note seems to carry the weight of centuries, not as burden, but as a quiet grace, a gift folded into the air itself. You breathe in slowly, letting it pass through you. Your shoulders loosen, the chest rises and falls with a deeper rhythm, and the pulse in your veins slows, in time with the chant. It has no beginning, no end. It simply exists, a thread of sound woven through the fabric of time. In that stillness, the boundaries blur between past and present, between sound and silence, between the human and the sacred. The monks, long gone, once guarded knowledge. Now their voices guard you. You, a fragile listener, are cradled in the dark. The chant drifts, slipping into the air like mist over still water. For a fleeting moment, the world holds its breath, and even that pause dissolves. You sit motionless, encompassed by the vast quiet that follows. There is no need for words. The rhythm persists somewhere inside you, steady, ancient, eternal. The last line of the chant seems to echo across centuries. Unspoken yet known, in the silence between breaths, all truths are one, and in that velvet darkness, enveloped by a presence older than memory, you understand. Everything converges: time, space, thought, and being into a singular, gentle awareness that is both infinite and intimate, a peace without edges. The room has grown still again. The last of the monk's chant has faded into the walls, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and ink lingering in the air. The hour is deep, too late to call it night, too early to call it morning. You sit alone at the desk, the world wrapped in a hush so complete it feels like the breath before creation. You reach for a sheet of parchment, pale, rough-edged, soft as pressed memory. The surface catches the candlelight like skin. As you run your fingertips across it, there's a faint grain beneath. Not smooth, not perfect, but alive. Every mark and tiny imperfection tells of the animal it once was, of the hands that stretched and cured it. It's as if the parchment itself remembers its origin, carrying time folded quietly within its fibers. You dip your quill into the small ink pot beside you. The ink is dark, with that faint metallic tongue that belongs to iron gall. As you lift the quill, a drop trembles at its tip, heavy, deliberate, before falling and blooming like a bruise against the pale sheet. Then comes the first stroke, slow, steady. The quill scratches faintly, a whisper more than a sound, and the words begin to unfurl. They are not perfect. They wander, loop, hesitate. Yet there is something deeply human in their uneven rhythm. Each letter is a small act of resistance against forgetting. You pause, let the ink dry, and breathe in its scent, sharp and sweet, mingling with the faint musk of old parchment. There's something grounding in it, something that binds you to every scribe who has ever sat at a desk like this. Monks, scholars, travelers, dreamers. All of them tracing the same thin black veins across pale skin, trying to leave a trace against the flood of time. Outside the window, a faint wind stirs. It sounds like the turning of a page too large for the world. You think of how fragile writing once was, how knowledge lived at the mercy of ink and patience. A single candle's tilt, a careless hand, and entire histories could vanish into flame or rain. And yet, humanity persisted, rewriting, reimagining, rediscovering. Until one day, in Mainz, Germany, around the year 1450, Johannes Gutenberg assembled a set of movable metal letters and changed the destiny of thought itself. The printing press was not merely an invention. It was a quiet revolution, the pulse of democracy, before anyone dared speak the word. With every printed page, knowledge escaped the monasteries and entered the hands of merchants, artisans, wanderers, the ordinary, and the curious. In that moment, time began to multiply. Ideas no longer lived in singular copies. They reproduced like seeds carried by the wind. The world itself became a book. You pause your writing, thinking of that, of how this page before you, handmade and trembling with ink, belongs to an older world, a slower world. You touch the edge of the parchment again and feel its coolness under your fingertips. The candle beside you flares slightly, its flame bending as if to read what you've written. Shadows ripple across the desk. For a moment, you sense how thin the barrier is between your breath and the centuries that came before. Your pen moves again, tracing not words this time, but patterns, spirals, lines, echoes of symbols half remembered from other pages. They flow into one another like rivers meeting in the dark, and somewhere in the back of your mind, the image of Stonehenge rises, vast stones standing solemn beneath a gray English sky. No one knows exactly why it was built, or how. Was it a calendar? A temple? A song frozen in stone? Each possibility feels true, and none do. Perhaps like this act of writing. It was meant to be both message and meditation, a way to trace the invisible lines that bind earth to sky, the human to the eternal. The thought lingers as you write another line, then another. The ink dries quickly now, forming tiny ridges you can feel with your fingertip. Every mark feels less like communication and more like communion, as though, by writing, you are in conversation with all who ever have. You realize how much of history was written exactly like this, one breath at a time, one careful stroke in the quiet between wars and storms. The parchment holds it all, the trembling hand of fear, the steady hand of faith, the clumsy hand of curiosity. The candle burns lower. A curl of smoke rises, steady as a sigh. You blow gently on the page to dry the last words. The ink gleams for a heartbeat, then settles, black into brown, brown into permanence. You set the quill aside. Its tip glistens faintly, like a sword laid down after battle. The page before you is simple. A few words, A few lines. Yet it feels heavy, as though it carries more than language, as though it holds the rhythm of every hour spent waiting. Learning, remembering. Your fingers linger over the parchment one last time, warm with the pulse of your presence, your quiet intention to join time's long, unbroken conversation. The chair creaks as you lean back. Outside, dawn whispers along the horizon, spilling faint light across the room. The inked page feels alive, not just a record, but a thread woven through centuries, voices, and the enduring hush of silence. You exhale, fold the parchment, and set it aside. Tomorrow, perhaps someone else will unfold it. Perhaps they will trace these same lines with their fingers and wonder who you were. But for now, it is enough to know this. The act of writing has always been a form of remembering, and in this small, quiet room, between ink, parchment, and fading firelight, you have remembered well. The ink has long since dried, the words settled into the parchment, as if woven into its very skin. They are no longer wet, no longer alive, only resting, dreaming quietly. You lower your gaze to the page, and for a long moment, you simply breathe, letting the silence fill the room like a held note lingering at the end of a song. Slowly, deliberately, you close the book. The worn cover, smooth from centuries of hands, meets the table with a soft. The sound is tiny, almost swallowed by the hush, yet it carries a peculiar weight, a quiet, final satisfaction, as though a long-forgotten chapter has found its resting place. The room exhales with you, and time itself seems to pause. Around you, the light wavers. The single candle, melted down to a stub, flickers in protest against the inevitable dark. Its flame bends and shivers, sending shadows that dance softly across the walls, the ghosts of all the words that have been spoken, written, and thought here tonight. You begin to tidy the desk, slowly, as though afraid to disturb the peace that has settled over the room. The quill returns to its holder. The inkpot is capped, the parchment stacked neatly. The smell of wax and parchment and faint smoke hangs in the air, the scent of endings. Your hands move without thought, each gesture deliberate, ritualistic. It feels like saying farewell, not just to a night's work, but to a certain state of being, the stillness, the solitude, the silent companionship of thought. For a moment, your gaze lingers on the candle again. The flame is smaller now, curling inward on itself, its light soft and amber. It reminds you of something fragile yet persistent, the human desire to understand, to create, to preserve meaning even in the smallest of spaces. You think of how knowledge once belonged solely to the cloisters, to monks hunched over manuscripts by candlelight, copying line after line in devotion and discipline. But the world changed. When the Renaissance dawned, the power of knowledge shifted. The great universities rose. Scholars, not monks, became the keepers of learning. Printing presses turned thoughts into something democratic, something dangerous. The age of illumination was not just about light, but about fire, the fire of the mind, the kind that refused to stay contained. And yet, as the centuries rolled on, something of the old silence was lost. The intimacy between reader and page, the meditative rhythm of copying, the whispered prayers between the lines. You find yourself wondering whether the monks ever felt the same melancholy when they closed their books for the night, that quiet ache between satisfaction and farewell. The candle sputters. The room darkens. You lean back, folding your hands in your lap. Through the high window, a faint streak of light from the moon falls across the desk, painting a pale ribbon over the book's cover. It feels like a benediction, a final touch of grace upon an ending. Your mind drifts, unbidden, to another mystery, one older and more restless. El Dorado. The city of gold. How many explorers crossed oceans, jungles and deserts chasing its promise? How many vanished, swallowed by rivers and rainforests, chasing a light that may never have existed? Perhaps El Dorado was never a city, but an idea, a reflection of this same yearning you feel now. The longing for completion, for discovery, for that one perfect truth shining at the horizon of the known world. The candle flickers again, as if to agree. You imagine those explorers standing under alien stars, gold dust clinging to their skin, their hearts filled with both wonder and madness. They, too, sought something eternal, not metal, but meaning. Not wealth, but remembrance. Maybe that is what all human creation is, a search for gold in the dark, a fire that flickers, defying extinction. The air in the room is cooling now. The last warmth from the hearth has faded, leaving only the faint scent of ash. You draw the cloak a little tighter around your shoulders and look once more at the closed book. How many hands have turned its pages before yours? How many will after? You cannot know. But in this small act of reading, writing, remembering, you've joined them, a quiet fellowship of the curious, stretching across centuries. The flame trembles, and steadies, and trembles again. You reach out and cup your hand near it, not to shield it, but to feel its last breath of heat. It warms your skin for a moment, a tender, fleeting warmth, and then the flame sighs out, vanishing into smoke. The darkness that follows is not empty. It is full of echoes, of presence, of everything that has been written, spoken, thought, and felt here. You sit there for a moment longer, eyes adjusting to the absence of light. The outlines of the room soften into shadow. The silence deepens into something almost sacred. And in that silence, you realize that endings are never truly endings, only transformations. The fire becomes smoke. The ink becomes memory. The words become air. You whisper a small goodnight, not to anyone in particular, but to the world itself, to the room, the book, the candle, the long procession of souls who kept the flame before you, somewhere in the distance. A bell tolls once, soft, distant, final. You rise slowly, the chair creaking under your weight. Your steps are quiet as you cross the floor, leaving behind the desk, the closed book, the faint curl of smoke rising like a prayer god at the door. You pause and look back. Darkness fills the room, calm and still. The fire is gone, yet its warmth and memory remain, gently lingering. In that quiet echo, you realize it is enough. The night has deepened into its quietest hour. The candle has long gone out, and in its place, the pale light of the moon has taken over, softer, colder, and strangely eternal. You rise from the chair, slowly, carefully, as though afraid to disturb the fragile silence that has settled over the world. The wooden floor creaks faintly beneath your feet, an old companion speaking in whispers. Each step echoes gently, rhythmic and calm, like the slow beating of a distant drum. The corridor stretches ahead, dim and serene. Through tall windows, moonlight spills in, tracing thin silver paths along the floorboards. Dust motes float lazily in the beams, just as they did in the afternoon sun. But now they move slower, gentler, as though lulled by the night itself. You walk through this half-lit world, and the air feels cool against your skin. The scent of old wood, faint wax, and forgotten paper lingers behind you, the perfume of thought and time. Somewhere, far off, a clock strikes the hour. The sound rolls through the halls like a soft wave, marking not an ending, but a descent. Your hand brushes the wall as you turn the final corner, and there, at the end of the corridor, your room waits. Its door is half open, as if it too has been waiting patiently. You step inside. The room greets you with stillness. No fire burns here, only moonlight spreading across the bed in a thin silvery pool. The sheets are cool at first touch, smooth beneath your fingertips. You pull the blanket over yourself and feel the warmth gather slowly. Like a tide returning to shore. The pillow cradles your head. The softness feels almost weightless, like resting upon a cloud. You shift once, twice, then still. Your breathing steadies, slow, deep, unhurried. In this cocoon of darkness and quiet, your thoughts begin to unravel. The rhythm of the day fades, replaced by a deeper, older rhythm, the heartbeat of the earth itself. You shift your focus to your toes, noticing them soften, release. One by one, the muscles in your feet loosen, like carefully untied threads. Your calves relax, then your thighs, until your legs feel heavy, sinking slightly into the mattress. Your breath flows calmly into your chest, steady and effortless dot with each exhale. The tension, the weight of the day, drifts away, leaving a growing sense of ease, as if your body is melting into the bed, fully supported, fully present, and ready to dissolve into the quiet stillness of rest. Your shoulders drop, releasing the weight you didn't know you carried. Your neck stretches, tension melting into nothing. The corners of your mouth loosen, your eyelids blink slowly, then settle into calm. Each breath rises and falls like a gentle tide. Each heartbeat glows like a lantern dimming into the mist. Outside, the world moves softly. Trees sway in the wind, and moonlight traces a silver line along the edge of your blanket. You let your mind wander over all that has passed, the words spoken, the warmth felt, the fire's glow, the quiet hours of reflection. They fold into memory, one by one, like pages closing in a long, tender book. In that stillness, you feel time stretch and soften, leaving only the quiet, patient presence of the moment. Somewhere in the vast expanse of history, the Middle Ages came to their close too. When Constantinople fell in 1453, the world exhaled and changed forever. The old faith in stillness gave way to the movement of new ideas, art, and invention. The Renaissance dawned, not abruptly, but like morning light slowly overtaking the stars. And yet, as with every ending, something of the past remained, not lost, but transmuted. The patience of the monks, the endurance of stone, the quiet rhythm of simple survival, all whispering still beneath the noise of progress. You close your eyes completely. One by one, the stories drift away, like tiny boats fading into the distant horizon of sleep, carried gently by the currents of night. Each tale dissolves softly, leaving only the quiet swell of darkness and the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing. And at the edge of waking, a thought stirs, gentle, ancient, and tender. It whispers softly, neither loud nor clear, hinting that perhaps the boundary between dream and memory is more fragile, more porous than we ever imagined, where both drift and mingle quietly in the mind's twilight. For even in the oldest scriptures, there are tales of prophetic dreams, visions that bridge the human soul and the fabric of the universe. Kings and monks alike recorded their messages from the night, a glimpse of tomorrow, whispered by something far beyond themselves. Tonight, as you drift between breaths, you step gently into that same current, the quiet, endless dialogue between thought and silence. The air feels cool, the room utterly still. Your heartbeat eases, slowing into the rhythm of the night dot outside. The moon drifts behind a thin veil of clouds, its glow softened, and the world settles deeper into a quiet hush, wrapped in gentle shadows that stretch across trees, rooftops, and the sleeping streets below. You drift now, suspended somewhere between this room and another, between centuries and quiet. In that stillness, you sense it again, not a sound, but a rhythm, the slow, eternal pulse of the living world. Your body feels weighty, grounded, while your thoughts lighten, untangling from the day. Gradually, even those thoughts dissolve, carried away like ash into darkness. The bed stretches endlessly beneath you, the night infinite above. You give yourself fully to the moment, letting go completely. Breath remains steady and calm until even that fades. And finally, there is only sleep, deep, peaceful, unbroken. End of script. Thank you for listening, everyone.